So when you start out in algebra and you have, let's say we have an x times an x plus 3, and we multiply that together, x times x is x squared and x times 3 is 3x. So that's multiplying it together. What factoring is trying to do is take that and pull it back apart. So we want to take a look at that and see, all right, I see this has an x and this has an x. It was multiplied in. We now want to divide that x out of there. So if I have an x squared there, I want to pull one out that leaves an x in that spot. And if we divide an x out of there, it leaves a 3 in that spot. And we went back to what it was in the first place. That's the idea with factoring. So here, when I notice this one, I've got an x squared there and an x there. I can divide an x out of that. If I divide an x out of that piece, it leaves an x. And if I divide an x out of that piece, it leaves just the 4. And now that thing is factored. As a check, if we multiply it back together, x times x is x squared, and x times 4 is negative 4x, and it's what it was already. So we're trying to take what's there and pull it apart. But what about if there's 3 pieces like this? Okay, well remember back from algebra, if you had x plus 2 and then maybe x minus 1, and you had to multiply it together like we did up there, it took several steps. X times x was x squared. X times negative 1 was negative 1x, 2 times x was 2x, and 2 times negative 1 was negative 2, and then those went together, and it became plus 1x minus 2. So now what we want to be able to do is take this and pull it apart into its pieces that it came from. So we're trying to take this and pull it apart to the pieces it came from. So these 3 things came from 2 sets of 2. So it came from something like this. Okay, I'm going to deal with the first term. I'm going to call that the first term. I'm going to denote that with an F. So this is the first spot, and these are the first spots. So first, first, first. Okay, the first numbers have to multiply to n squared. Well, the only thing that can do that is n times n. So an n times an n is an n squared. I have the first term done. Okay, then I'm going to go to the last one. I'm going to save the middle for last. So the next thing I'm going to do is worry about the last spot. So this is the last spot of the answer. This is the last spot of both pieces. So I need to get something that multiplies to 14, but now there's a problem. I have some choices. 1 times 14 multiplies to 14, but so is 2 and 7. So it's not both of those, only one of those works. That's where the 5 comes in. We got a positive 5 there. So now I'm going to call these 2 right here the inners. I'm going to call that an I for inside. And I'm going to call this an O for outside. Okay, so I'm going to make a little acronym. F-O-I-L. The first times the first has to make the first. The last times the last has to make negative 14. But now the inside and the outside have to add up to make negative 5. So it's trial and error here. I'm first going to try the 1 and 14. Okay, 1 times 14 does make 14. Now it has to be negative 14, but I'll put negatives in there later. Okay, now I'm going to check the inners. 1 times n would be 1n. N times 14 would be 14n. I need to be able to add or subtract those together to be 5. If I add them, they make 15. If I subtract them, they make 13. They will never be able to add or subtract to a 5, so 1 and 14 are not it. That means it must be the 2 and the 7. Okay, now I'm going to check the insides. The insides are 2, and the outsides are 7. Okay, if I subtract those, I can get a 5. Now I need a positive 5. Okay, so I'm going to subtract them like this. I'm going to make a positive 7 and a negative 2. So I want a positive 7 and a negative 2 because positive 7 plus negative 2 makes positive 5. Now I have to make sure that the lasts still work. The last, negative 2, times the last, 7, has to be negative 14, which it is. So I got the inners and the outers and the last to go together. There's the factor. If I multiply those pieces back together, I would get n squared plus 5n minus 14. Okay, so number 3. All right, first of all, the firsts have to make v. So v times v is v squared. Now my choices, I have to play with a little bit. 1 and 16 could multiply to 16, 2 and 8 could multiply to 16, or 4 and 4 could multiply to 16. Now knowing that the inners and the outers have to add up to -8, there's no way 1 and 16 can ever go to an 8, so I'm going to throw that out. If 2 and 8 add up, they make 10, if I do an addition. If I subtract them, they go to 6. Well, neither one of them makes an 8, so I know that it can't be 2 and 8 either. 4 and 4 is going to add up to 8, or 4 minus 4 is going to subtract to 0. That's the only one that could possibly work, so I'm going to start with 4 and 4. Okay, 4 times v is 4v on the inside, 4 times v is 4v on the outside. I need those to become a -8. Well, if I do -4 plus -4, that would be -8, so I'll make them negative and negative. Okay, that makes the outers and inners work to -8. But I still have to have the last part work. The last has to be multiplied to positive 16. So this last is -4, this last is -4. Sure enough, -4 times -4, positive 16. I got it to work. Now it gets harder when there's a number in the front. See, so far there was no options for the first, but sometimes there are options for the first. Okay, well, at first look, I see that they're all even. So the first thing I could do is divide out a 2, and that'll make the number smaller. So that's always something to do. And I don't want a negative in the front either, so I'm gonna divide out a -2. If I divide this piece by -2, there's only a v squared left. If I multiply this piece by -2, if I divide it, if I divide this piece by -2, it's positive 12. And if I divide this piece by -2, it's positive 32. See, if I multiply that -2 into all of them, it gets back the original. Okay, the -2 comes along for the ride, but now I'm going to try to factor this. Okay, first, there's the first, has to be v squared, well that's v times v. Now for the last, I have 1 times 32, I have 2 times 16, I have 4 times 8, and that's it. So now this combinations have to add up to 12, add or subtract up to 12. Well, that'll either be 33 or 31. If I add 33, if I subtract 31, that's not it. 2 and 16 could add up to an 18, or they could subtract to 14. Well, neither one of those are 12, so that's not it. 4 plus 8 is 12, 4 minus 8 is 4. So it's possible this one will work. So I'm going to start out with the 4 and the 8. Okay, I need that to be a positive 12. So the inners are 4, the outers are 8. If I make that a positive and that a positive, positive 4, positive 8 is positive 12. And now I still need to make sure the last times the last is positive 32. It is. There's the factor. Okay, sometimes you cannot pull out that first number. See, not everything divides by 7. 44 does not divide by 7. 45 does not divide by 7. So now we just have to start. Now it makes it a little bit tougher. We may have to play around with it a little more. The only thing that makes 7 is 7 and 1. So we don't have too many choices there. It's not 1 and 1 anymore, but it is only one choice, 7 and 1. There's nothing else that multiplies to 7. Okay, 45 could be 1 times 45. That's probably not it, but I need a 44 there, so that if I subtract, we get 44. 3 goes in there. 3 times 15 is 45. 5 times 9 is 45. So there are my 3 choices. Now, it looks like if I subtract these, I could get 44, which is what I want. If I add them, I could get 46. So maybe I would try this 1 and 45. I'm going to put it in there lightly. Okay, see how the inners now are 1, but the outers are 7 times 45? 7 times 45 is I don't know, 300 something. That's never going to add up to 44. So that did not work. See, it looked like it might have been a 44, but now this 7 makes an extra twist. Before you throw that out, though, switch them around. It could be 45 and 1, like that. See, now the inners are 45. 7 times 1 is 7. Okay, 45 and 7, that gets closer to 45. That's either 52 or 40 or 38, but not 44. Now I've tried everything. I've tried 1 and 45, forward and backwards. Didn't work either way, so now I do throw the whole thing out. So next I'm going to try the 3 and 15. Okay, I'm not going to put the 15 out here. That's going to go with the 7 because that's going to make it way too big. So if it has a chance, that would be the 3 and that would be the 15. That makes the inners right here 15 and the outers, 3 times 7 is 21. Okay, 21 and 15, if I add those together, I get 46. Close, but no cigar. And I'm pretty sure if I do the other order, not gonna work. So it looks like 9 and 5's all there is. So I'll put the 5 out here so it goes with the 35, and I'll put the 9 in here so it goes with the 1. 9 times 1 is 9n. 7n times 5 is 35n. Sure enough, if I add those together, I get 44. I need it to be negative 44. So negative 9 plus negative 35 does add up to negative 44. So that's a negative and that's a negative. So they're both negative. A negative 9 times a negative 5 is still positive 45. So the lasts are okay, the outer inners are okay, and 7 times 1 is still 7. So there's the whole thing, 7n minus 9 and n minus 5. If I multiply that, so we divided it apart. So if I multiply that back together, it will go here. Okay, number 6, I would like to make these numbers smaller. It does not look like I can divide out a 20. 20 doesn't go into that, but I can, it does look like I can divide out a 4. If I pull a 4 out of this, that leaves 5n squared. I'm dividing out a 4. Dividing out a 4 out of that will be 26. And dividing a 4 out of that will be 24. Okay, so we have the 4. I don't have any choices for the front for the first term. 5 times 1 is all we have. But for 24, 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. There's 4 choices now. Now, I'm probably not going to start, when I do this, I usually don't start with the extremes. I'm going to start with something in here, probably the 3 and the 8. And I'm going to do a little bit in my head. If I take the 5 times 8, that's 40. And then the 3 times 1. 40 and 3 is never going to go to 26. What if I do it the other way around? 5 times 3, that's 15. And then 8 times 1, 15 and 8 is not going to be 26. I don't think 3 and 8 is even going to work. So now I'm going to, in my mind, try 4 and 6. If I put the 6 out there, that'd be 5 times 6, that's 30. And if I put the 4 in there, that'll be 4. I'm going to try that, 6 and 4. Okay, see the insides? 4. The outsides? 30. I need those to combine to be negative 26. So if I make this plus 4 and minus 30, positive 4 minus 30 is negative 26. So the 4 part has to be positive, and the other part then has to be negative. I do need to check that that did not mess up the last term. So positive 4 times negative 6 is negative 24. So there I have that one.